All right, so I've been eliminated now from the Glorious U top 16, so I'm gonna just start recording some of the games that are going on. So I'm gonna be looking at continuing in my pod. This is BizarroDave, Dave Cordero, and uh, Ewaldus's match. So we've seen Ewaldus's deck. That was what I faced in round one. And Dave is playing Caruso, Chef des U-Boats. This deck is kind of famous. It is a. I have too many crucibles open. Uh, um, it is a 5 Eddy deck with triple Exhume. It's got a Zenzi, it's got a Neutron Shark, and it's got a reassembling automaton. And so the way it works is, I mean, it can drive up key costs, and it can use this Neutron Shark to clear your board while just bouncing off of this reassembling automaton. And then it can also just exhume all these eddies and so forth. Going back to look at Ewaldus's deck. So Ewaldus, uh, the key thing that he's going to have here is this Hypnotic Command, his size, and then of course key abduction. The Numquid the Fair is going to be pretty important here with board size. Lights out, he can hop things like the reassembling automaton back into the hand, do things like pawn sacrifice. So this should be a pretty good match. So I you know, I'm pretty I'm interested to see who comes out ahead in this one. I do think this is. I was just actually chatting with Dave between matches, and I know he's a little worried about this match. Well, I disconnected, and that explains why I wasn't connecting with this match. So here we are. Luckily, we doesn't look like we missed anything. Uh, uh, so um, Dave comes out and drops his first Eddy in archives. Again, sort of seeing how Ewaldus is going to respond to this. The a lot of people when they're playing against Caruso imagine that the dealing with these eddies is a really good first play, and there's a sense in which it is, but the real challenge is all of the exhumes. So Dave comes out with a Bornit's Touch. He reveals Zizix the Many, the Dominator, Take Hostages, Grey Monk, and Grabber Jammer. There's a bunch of great targets in there. If I were Dave, I would probably be going after this Dominator or the Grabber Jammer, though Zizix the Mini is also a great target, and he goes after Zizix. Again, it just with the way Ewaldus's board, the way this is very similar to the matchup I played earlier, where you want to be disrupting as much Mars as you can. So uh, damaging uh, the Mars, purging Mars out is really what you want to do. Zizix versus Grabber versus Dominator. I think there's different arguments there. Dominator depends on how much you anticipate fighting. Zizix depends on how much you imagine he's going to be reaping. And Dominator and Jammer is how much you value key cost. So Ewaldus pushed back, did a bunch of steal there. He did an Urchin to lower, to steal one, and then Ghostly Hand to gain two, and then steal an additional, pushing himself up to 5 amber, and then up, throwing Dave's creatures back into hand. Dave responds with a Hysteria. Uh, well, first a Rot Grub and then a Hysteria to return Rot Grub, and basically costing 2 amber and then returning his disboard. So they're currently both at 0 keys. Ewaldus with 3 amber, Dave with 0. So here we see our Numquid come out. This is going to be able to eliminate quite a number of creatures. The I would say there's a misplay here in that Ewaldus killed Buzzle first before killing Nefru, which gave Dave an amber. So Ewaldus returns with a pretty solid Sanctum board. So the key elements of this board are Frankus, which allows him to capture after destroying a creature. Turning to shadows with more steel, we have a Poison Wave, an Urchin to steal one. Brings out a Dodger. Pawn sacrifice, likely sacrificing that Urchin to take down the Eddy, and then reset the automaton. So Urchin goes down and exhausts automaton, and that brings Ewaldus to check. So Logos from Dave, we got a Tattoo Vapors. Probably going to see an Eddy come out here to bring Ewaldus off the check. So Ewaldus's key cost is now 16 with the double Eddy. And he used Quantum Finger Trap to Staunch Knight wants to be on a flank, so he got rid of Staunch Knight's bonus power. Ewaldus goes back to Sanctum. His key cost is currently 18 because of the double Eddy with 6 cards in Archive. He has 3 Sanctum creatures out. Frankus can capture one when he attacks and destroys a creature. Dave only has one. Brings out a Grey Monk to increase everyone's armor. So he's likely looking to try to deal with these eddies. He's going to fight into Daughter. And Frankus, I would assume, will fight into one of these eddies. Because Frankus will take no damage. Though that will not get him into check. So key cost is still 12, though he's at 7 amber and has reduced Dave to 0. So Dave goes back into Logos, uses the Automaton to fight Dodger. It's a good play there because just putting that damage on Dodger is going to render Dodger unable to steal, unable to trigger that fight effect in most cases. Now he's going to use the Neutron Shark, bouncing it off of the Automaton to clean off much of that board. Again, this is a really persistent play. The big thing, so he ended up discarding an Eddy, which prevented the repeat of this play of the Shark. Key cost is now up to 20 for Ewaldus, but Dave is still struggling to get himself into sort of any threat range himself. So he's doing a decent job of controlling Ewaldus's key cost, which is something Caruso does very well, but he's not himself threatening. So this is going to be, I think, the sort of challenge and balance of this game here, because Ewaldus's deck can steal. And do other things to just kind of keep Dave off balance. I mean, ultimately, Ewaldus doesn't care if they go to time with no keys at this amber, and Ewaldus has just a bucket full of amber because he wins if he can keep the sort of relative amber cost. So Dave does need to figure out some way of sort of changing this board. So we have a Shadows Call here. Dodger is probably going to fight, I would guess, into Shark. Yep. So he fights into Shark to steal one. That's going to prevent that continual bounce, and then he's going to pawn sacrifice him, I'm guessing, to take down those 2 eddies. So that will move him into check. However, Dave has not called Dis for some time, so I'm guessing we're going to see some Exhumes come out, and these eddies just return. So here's our first Exhume. We get an Eddy. and a second Exhume to get an Eddy. So that's the real danger of this deck, is the uh, is are those Exhumes. Ewaldus's key cost is now 24, where Dave's key cost remains 6, but he only has 3. So the other kind of nastiness that is sort of hidden in Caruso is the actual Brobnar. So there's not. We haven't seen the Brobnar come out, but Ragnarok is a board clear, and if he does bring out some Brobnar creatures, the Overrun and Barn Raising can actually start to manipulate Amber Cost as well. So it'll be interesting to see if he actually plays any of this Brobnar, because the Brobnar in this deck is actually not bad either. It's normally just fodder for the archive, but at some point that archive has to come out, potentially. So we're going to see this shark bounce again. And now we might actually see Dave get into check threat. One thing I may have actually done differently here, if I were Dave, rather than just bounce, is actually kill Spider. Oh, he has. I take that back. I forgot about. Obviously, Dave knows his deck better than I do. I forgot about Quantum Finger Trap. So he's centered Zenzik. He's in check, and Ewaldus's key cost is 24. This is a pretty brutal set of outcomes for Ewaldus here. And Dave can now. He basically has board control and amber control, and he can just keep dropping creatures and reaping himself into check. So he's going to reap here, and it doesn't really matter what he does. He's key cost for Ewaldus is now 36. Dave is in check for key 2. It looks like he's taken pretty solid control of this game. So we're going to see a Hypnotic Command here. It'll be interesting to see where this amber is placed. I'd probably place it on. I can see the argument for Daughter, because Daughter is a creature you want to eliminate. The trouble with putting it on Daughter is elusive, so I probably would have put it on Igor because that's a 2-power without elusive. Though you do have double Pawn Sacrifice, Relentless Whispers, Lights Out, so you have ways of pushing Daughter off the board. But with Dave's Logos, running like this, it's probably a little too late. Ewaldus probably needed to take control of this game a little bit earlier. Um, I think, people like to talk about Caruso as if it's an unbeatable deck, and it's obviously not. If you look at its official play record, it's been beaten. Um, but the ways to beat it, I think, involve Purge, um, and ways to interact with the archive. Um, uh, but if you are purging exhumes, that's obviously very good. If you're purging creatures, that's going to be very good. Um, and obviously, a Coda deck doesn't have those tools in its tool belt, and so ultimately, um, you're just going to run out of those if you can't outrun it, which is something that you possibly could also do. Um, so Dave has won the game. Uh, it was a pretty entertaining game.